So good evening, everybody. We are holding towards the end of page Membeis, the 42nd chapter. As we mentioned in the last few weeks, yes, it is a lengthier chapter. It could be, there's a possibility we'll conclude today, if not today, Be'ezus Hashem, this coming week. So it would be in the original text on page Samach Aleph. The first line, for that matter, you could see it as well in the corresponding English text, as we mentioned all along, that we can follow generally these classes, and in particular this classes on these very this very chapter, rather the previous classes on this very chapter, up till the point that we're holding on this very website, the TanyaOnline.com. And again, for the newcomers, you can appreciate this website, namely as there's a separate scroll bar for the text, and as such easy to follow along accordingly. So we're holding again on the first line, Va'id Zeis, additional to which we mentioned in the past few weeks. We usually recap even a little bit, just a bit. Maybe we'll do so now, even though I always feel that the entire time should be spent for this subsequent class or for the next class, simply because it's always, as we mentioned, you could see the previous class. Very easy access, extremely easy access to the previous class on this very website. But just when we say va'id, to understand what's va'id, additional to what? Additional to what we mentioned in the past few weeks of Hashem's the recognition, not only recognition, but from the neshama's perspective, a vision, a clear vision, a clear appreciation, a transparent, clear appreciation of the presence and reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of Hashem, not only in the entire world, but in a personal manner to everything within creation over me, and knows everything about myself, about everything, namely not as someone who knows something about someone else, a different reality, but Hashem knowing himself. That's the way he knows everything. And again, that tells us that very precise clarity. Hashem appreciates every single detail within creation, and as Hashem is binitzav a love upon me, and he is monitoring me as an individual, and he looks, he gazes, he examines intestines and heart to see how I serve him, and it's relevant to him, all one's actions, all one's speech, every single step of a person, he counts, meaning to say that is the expression of the Alter Rebbe, like this is it in the most absolute manner possible. That we overall know that is one thing, but we recognize that profoundly, as if we see it clearly, knowing that Hashem's presence and reality is in a way not that he hovers over reality, not just that he controls the reality because he's the one who created the world and so on and so forth, but more so to the maximum precise nuance and detail. And again, with the explanation of the Alter Rebbe, based on the Rambam, the way that Hashem knows what's going on is, again, it's about knowing himself. And on top of that, we mentioned that this very important dimension within this whole hitbonenut, with this whole contemplation, with this whole presentation the Alter Rebbe gives us, that ultimate clarity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in every single nuance and detail, is that he's not nispal, he's not impacted this which goes on, because we mentioned many times precisely when I know something what goes on with myself, but not necessarily do I have the ability to focus adequately on every single detail, because I'm impacted everything that happens with myself, especially things which hurt and so on, but Hashem is not impacted, so millions and billions of stuff can go on at the same time, but Hashem is not impacted by neither. Conversely, everything that goes on is Hashem seeing and experiencing himself, not some entity out of the presence of reality and looking into reality, but Hashem is reality, because there's nothing else exists other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that clarity on Elokus, kind of the ability to appreciate Hashem to the maximum, again with that ultimate clarity and transparency, that is embedded in the neshama of every single yid. This is the das, that das faculty, which exists within every single human being, but in this case, which again brings clarity to every matter. We mentioned that there's something you understand, that you appreciate on the chokhmah level, you appreciate on the bina level, but the das level is a total different world in every subject that exists. But in this case, to have that clarity in a lakus, which is by definition transcendent and removed, because you're dealing with the creator, how could there be clarity of the creator in the mind of creation, of a created being, of a created entity? That's what Alter Rebbe says. That is the Moshe which exists within every single yid. The Moshe, which is the representation of das and Elokus, clarity and Elokus, he imparts with that das and he embeds it into every single yid, in as such, this clarity and Elokus, the way it's by Moshe Rabbeinu, one way or another, microcosmically exists within every single yid, and therefore the Yiras Hashem, the fear, the awe of HaKadosh Baruch Hu becomes something natural, normal, again with this Alter Rebbe explaining them. Mo Hashem lekecha v'shayim mimcha kim liyira. What is Hashem asking you? Says Moshe Rabbeinu, just to fear Him. And the Gemara says, really, what is this? Just to fear Him. Yiras Shamayim is not something simple. The Gemara says, yeah, in the face of Moshe Rabbeinu, which has that clarity and godliness, and it looks, it's something small, it's something trivial. So the Alter Rebbe asks, Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't talking about himself, he was asking Am Yisrael. So the Alter Rebbe says, this is the Moshe Rabbeinu. The Gemara is referring to the Moshe Rabbeinu which exists within every single yid, that he has that clarity, Elokus, again, coming from Moshe Rabbeinu, which imparts with that das, with that clarity, Elokus, with every single yid in his generation. And in every single generation, as such, because the Moshe Rabbeinu which exists within every single yid, Yiras Hashem, true reverence, fear, and dread of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a norm, is default by a yid. The Rebbe continues, V'oid, additional to this, one should remember, that just like a king of flesh and blood, the main fear by a king of flesh and blood is from his pnimius, from his chayis, meaning to say from his inward flow or expression, his vitality, his inward expression, not necessarily from the external physical appearance of the king, meaning to say, or the body of the king. It's the king. When you say, look, there's the king, it's obviously we identify the king with a body and his royalty, his regality comes through this very body. But everybody understands that it's not about the physical body, the appearance of the physical body. The physical body transmits that royalty, that regality which exists within this human being, which makes him the king. Now, one way or another, we know that the body and the neshama are very much intertwined. It's a real keli, it's a true lavush, it's a true garment. That it's something that it's not like, okay, let's look at this box, let's try to find certain energy, royalty, something grand which will come through this physical box. Open it up this way, look inside this way, and you'll find it. And because it exists in that container, therefore, inevitably you'll find it. It doesn't work like that with body and soul. The body certainly gives out, because body and soul are so connected. In other words, this is a true keli, a true garment over the neshama, over the nefesh. And therefore, body and nefesh and guf, the guf becomes a true vehicle to which the nefesh is able to manifest. When nefesh to be able to be expressed, the soul to be able to express, that exists in every body and nefesh and guf. Body and soul, when it comes to the king, similarly, when it comes to the king, it's not just like a container, go find royalty in this container, but the body itself, the whole image, the physique, the whole appearance, the composure of this person, of this human being, demonstrates royalty, that is what makes him the king. But we still can all appreciate that in the end of the day, it's not the guf, it's not the body, it's that energy, it's that royal energy which comes through this body. For example, we notice, and again this is reflective at the time when a king sleeps. She yashan, when a king sleeps, ain't shum yira mimenu. There's no fear at all from the king. Now, Alter Rebbe writes, ain't shum yira mimenu. We do know that when a king is sleeping, no one would get close anyways. And and we don't treat this as just another human being sleeping, understandably. Alter Rebbe definitely is not negating that when he says, Ein shum yira mimenu. But the point is, what he's saying, Alter Rebbe is saying, is that why is there constant fear and dread of this person, even he's sleeping? Because he could wake up, he just went to sleep. He's in function, and his sleeping is just in a way. When we look at sleeping by a physical king, that's just part of what he needs to do as a human being in order to regain his energy as a king and to reflect that energy in the next 18 hours or what, or similar, with that demonstration of kingship and leadership and royalty and so on. So that's part of what he does, and therefore when we walk, we know that that's the bedroom where the king is sleeping. We still have a certain fear and a certain dread, because we know that's the king. The king, it's the same king, and he just needs to sleep because he's a human being. But what Alter Rebbe says, "Ein shum yira mimenu," means it's just a time to appreciate that moment when he's sleeping, that the function of kingship, the function of him as a melech, the function of him as a royal entity, doesn't overtly come across at those moments. Because what you see the body without the expression of the melech. You see a body without an overt appearance or an overt function, an overt ambiance, which usually extracts the dread, the reverence, the awe from the people around, because he's sleeping at the time. Therefore, what you see is just the external veneer. You see his body. So again, on the surface, we know when a king sleeps, there is, in this one way or another, there's still a fear, or there's still a reverence, sense of reverence. But again, the point is, Alter Rebbe says, "Ein shum yira mimenu," meaning to say, if he was constantly sleeping, for example, if this person, everybody knows that this was the king, and he's always sleeping, he's never up. So then, he's never up, and therefore that's all we know about him, that he is the image, he is the icon called king, and he truly comes from royal family, and he is the descendant of the previous king. But he's always sleeping, as an example. Not necessarily the average person has that dread, has that reverence, that sensation of reverence. as opposed to when he's, again, because that's all they know about him. There's a body without a life, without without a soul. In this case, the kingship, that sensation of royalty, that sensation of regality doesn't come across, because that's all people know about him is just his body. As opposed to when a king is in function, so then again, when he's sleeping, we know, we just saw him in function just an hour ago, and we know in 1 hour we're going to again see the same king in function. So obviously there's a certain dread in the area where the king is sleeping. The famous pasuk which we recite every day about Shlomo Melech when he rested and so on. There is obviously the perpetual awe and fear of any king even when he sleeps. But Alter Rebbe says Ein Shum is just because, again, it's just when you think about the image of the king constantly in a manner of resting, of sleeping, so you're always focusing on his body, not necessarily there's that dread. Because we can appreciate that it's not about the external veneer of the king. It's about this which comes across, which is transparent, this which is transmitted through the body, this awe, this uniqueness of this personality, of this individual as a royal individual, which is transmitted through the body, not the external veneer. And what's the Alter Rebbe getting at over here? That ultimately it's not only that recognition, that cognitive establishment by the person of that clarity in a lakus, knowing that Hashem Nitzav Alav, that everything is Hashem and Hashem is everything. And again, as we mentioned, again, Alter Rebbe elaborated in the previous weeks about that the presence of Hashem in detail and Hashem's knowledge and interest, and from his perspective, his scrutiny in every reality and every detail and nuance which exists within Olam, but the ability for us to as well understand that even though I cannot put a physical image to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, understandably, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not a physical image, is not limited to, and he's not described in any physical manner, but that doesn't say that that doesn't compromise at all in my appreciation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This, where the Alter Rebbe gives this mashal, this example, that when you think about a melech, a king of flesh and blood, it's not about his physical appearance, it's not about rather the body, again, which is reflective when he sleeps, you don't see that kingship, so to say, you don't see that personality coming through the body because he's sleeping. So too, when you look around, you see, where is HaKadosh Baruch Hu? What do they say? They ask the child, I think it's the Kotzker, if I'm not mistaken, or one of the Rabbeim for that matter, where's HaKadosh Baruch Hu? I'll give you a candy if you tell me where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. And he said, I'll give you 2 candies if you tell me where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not. Because again, it's his answer, besides his brilliance of an answer of a child and the absoluteness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the mind of the child, and again, in which lies within that response. But basically he was saying, don't look for anything in particular. It's everything around you. When you look at everything, you see the entire existence around you, you appreciate, you know that it's the energy behind all this which you see is what is real, and that is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that is Hashem. So you're pretty much, you're in tune to the God, the reality. You're in tune to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're going to see what I see. I see heaven and earth, and I see the trees and the grass and everything. Well, we know even by a physical king, where you can pinpoint and say, this is him. And we know exactly that this is him. Hundreds of people, thousands of people rather, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. Myriads of millions of people know exactly where he is. This is him. This is where he is. He's in that palace. Even then, that you can identify, we can appreciate it. It's not the physical appearance, the physical facade. the body. It's the energy of this king, which in the personality of the king, the royalty of the king, which comes through the body. So when we're looking for Hashkadosh Baruch Hu, it's what's behind everything what we see, and that's real. That's what's real, again, because that's what's real, what Alter Rebbe is telling us over here. Even in a physical king, which you can identify and say, here he is. It's not that here he is, here is the body. The body means nothing, again, in this context of the awe and reverence and dread of this human being as a king. It's not about that just physical, external appearance or facade, which is his guf, his body. Despite, again, we mentioned very clear, the body of the king is also could be very unique as well, because the guf of the nefesh, they're so united as a perfect lavush, a perfect garment, as we use the terms used in Chassidus, that there's a garment which just covers up, and there's a garment which the air, the light, the energy, the vitality comes through and is transmitted in a way that is transparent within the container. The air, the lichtigkeit, in this case, a body does express the grandness of the person, whoever he may be. In this case, the body somewhat is a perfect conduit through which the royalty and regality of the king comes across. Make no mistake. A king, sometimes you look at him, he looks at you. There's something very grand about that. You can appreciate the king via his body, 100%. Everything about him, his gestures, his movements, his walk, it's all class, and it's all, everything expresses, every tenua of his means, every expression of his reveals and expresses royalty. Make no mistake, true, because again, body and soul is the true keli to the oir of the nefesh. More than any other example of lavush, garment. There's no question a person puts on a jacket which is fitted. The jacket brings out a certain class within the person's famous Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan Ayakari Mone Mechabduse, the Yerichan would call his garments his honor, because garments can bring out a certain glory which exists within the human being. But nonetheless, it's still a garment. You can take it off, you could put it on. It's external, so you could have it fitted, and it brings out a lot of the person, the personality of the person. But nonetheless, it's not that perfect lavush, which is in the context of kelim and a container, and the light to which the container is supposed to bring out and draw and make that light manifest to the outside, which even garments do. But nonetheless, garments is still not that perfect container, because again, you can take it off and put it on, as opposed to body and soul. They're always together, and always together, which means the keli of the guf is a perfect keli, which does transmit the aura of the soul, 100%. But nonetheless, we can appreciate it's not the physical body. The physical body is there to bring out the aura of the nefesh. In this case, to bring out that royalty, to bring out that regality of the king. So therefore, when we looking for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's all HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But where is it? I just see something physical, which is heaven and another. No, it's nothing to do with the physical, even when you're dealing with the Melech Basar Badam, with the physical king. It's all about what stands behind. It's his nefesh. It's the soul of the king. And that is what extracts. And that is what arouses that reverence of this personality, of this person, of this king. And so too, the Alter Rebbe says over here, when you think about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Pnimiyusa v'chayusa ein nir leinu basar. And when you want to identify that pnimius of the king, you want to identify that personality, that nefesh of the king, could you pinpoint it? Could you touch it and say, this is it? You can't. The body you can, but the nefesh you can't. You just know it's coming across. It's being transmitted through this body. But go put your fingers on that royalty, the aura, the royalty, rather, the greatness of this personality, which is the king. Put your fingers in. Where is it? Where is it? I can't put my fingers on, but it's everything. That's what it really is. Even though what I could put my fingers on the body, but the body is not about that. The kingship, what extracts from me, what arouses my reverence, is not the body. So the body I could pinpoint, but that's not what brings out my fear of this person. It's the energy, it's the nefesh, it's what stands behind the body, which is transmitted through the body. That is what brings out the dread. That is what arouses my fear, my reverence of this person. But that I can't put my fingers on. And that's the similarity. He says that you cannot see it with physical eyes. It's b'einei haseichel. I appreciate it with my eyes, intellectual eyes. That's the literal translation. I see he's the king. I see his personality coming through that physical facade, that physical body. So I see it, but I can't pinpoint it like I could touch the physical body. Is basar b'gufi levusha, via the body, via the garments, the unique garments of the king. That's the way I'm able to identify the king's personality. I know that the vitality of the king is invested in this person. And therefore, and so too, in this exact same fashion, Yeshua later, that's Hashem, that one is meant to fear HaKadosh Baruch Hu, via sing. And how sing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but again, not something that I can pinpoint and say, this is it. It's that leaf, or that tree, or that sun, or that moon, and so on. Obviously, pointing that and identifying HaKadosh Baruch Hu like that, with that, in that fashion, that's not only not true, but that's clear idolatry. Hashem says in the Torah that we should never give God an image. But to the contrary, I know that everything which exists, again, similar to that analogy, when it comes to a physical body, it's not a physical king, rather, a king of flesh and blood. It's not the physical body which identifies the king. It's his chayis, his nefesh, his personality, his soul, this ambiance of royalty coming through that body, which even though I cannot touch it, I cannot pinpoint it with my physical finger, but nonetheless, it's real to me. Again, as the Alter Rebbe used the Lashon, it's an intellectual vision, but vision it is. So too, by looking at the heaven and earth and the entire army of heaven and earth, again, the stars, the moon, the sun, and so on, we know that Ein Sof Baruch Hu Melubish Bahem is the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is invested in them, to give them life. Even though there's so many layers and so many veneers and so many garments, which again, over this chayis, we know there's the only energy, and the ability not only to function but to virtually exist is only because of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is coming through them, in other words, was invested in them, and as such that I am able to identify Hashem via the levushim, via the garments of everything around me. But nonetheless, apparently there's such thick, so to say, levushim. In other words, it's the garment. There's so many garments which perhaps one would suggest that when it comes to a physical king, it's easier to identify the nefesh of the king, the soul of the king, via his body. As we mentioned before, particularly when it comes to a body which is a perfect container, and again, something which transmits the energy of the nefesh. But when it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's so many different garments, and I look at the world around me, not necessarily I'm able to have that same sensation, or that sensation of Elokus, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So he says that in the end of the day, let's take that very example of the king. Let's say the king, it's winter and it's very cold outside, and the king is coming and appearing himself in front of his people, in front of his subjects. Because it's so cold, so he's wearing a sweater, and then he wears his royal garments, and on top of that he wears a beautiful coat. And one is going to say, well, when you saw the king, he was in the winter with that whole appearance. And in other words, or without jumping over here, in other words, when you see the king in that fashion, it's totally irrelevant how many garments the king is wearing, because the Guf HaMelech B'Seichel, we know that the king is there. It's the same person, exactly the same person which extracts and arouses the same awe and fear and reverence as if he would walk out in a nice, cool, a nice summer day, or when he's wearing a little sweater, or a nice summer day when he comes out with his garment without a sweater, without a coat. As someone would say, well, you appreciated the king, you saw the king in the winter, I saw the king in the summer, and therefore there's more of the king which came out in the summer and the winter because he wasn't wearing that winter coat, which is obviously nonsense, because it's irrelevant how many garments this individual is wearing. It's the royalty, the aura of royalty, which comes across this person, despite he could be wearing multiple garments. And the same thing one would suggest, well, there's so many, these garments are so, I'm supposed to find God within these garments, but apparently there's so many garments, there's so many layers, which perhaps doesn't allow me to see face to face, or to have the riyas, that intellectual vision on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because there are so many garments. So the Alter Rebbe says that back to the example of a king of flesh and blood, there's no difference when of the king of the fear and the awe of a king of flesh and blood, Ben Shu'arum, maybe is not wearing any clothes, or Ben Shen, again, this is a metaphorically speaking, Ubein Shulavish Luvesh Echad, may he be wearing one garment, Ubein Shulavish Luvushim Rabim, or he's wearing many garments. It's totally irrelevant, because we know that it's all the same king. And the same thing when we look at heaven and earth, and we are meant to have that clarity, Nolukus via knowing that it's the energy behind it, which is what it's truly all about. Because, as we mentioned many times, if Hashem pulls his energy out of any created being, not only it will cease to function, it'll fall apart, it would literally cease to exist, disappear. Everything we see is just in existence because Hashem is pumping energy and vitalizing and vivifying and this the particular creature, the particularly created entity, created being. If it's the sun, it's the moon. If it's the tree, the grass, this blade of grass, this pebble of or this stone, or this blade of grass, or this little even a piece of earth. There's nothing would exist from the greatest created beings to the smallest created beings. Only existence because Hashem continues to pump his energy into that created being. So if Hashem pulls back his energy, the created being would not exist. And therefore, when we look at everything around us, we know that in the end of the day, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is not only behind, is the energy of this which we are looking at. And as such, even though we cannot identify the Elokus over here, but that's similar to the King of flesh and blood, which we can see, identify, and acknowledge with our eyes, with our physical eyes. But again, the physical eyes is able just to capture the physical body. But what we really appreciate, and again, what really arouses our awe from him, is his energy, is that stream again of kingship, which comes through and is transparent and is transmitted through this body. And so too when we look at everything around us, because we know that it's only HaKadosh Baruch Hu which brings everything into being on a constant basis. And as Alter Rebbe mentions in Shaykh Adamon, it's not something which HaKadosh Baruch Hu did 6,000 so many years ago, thousands of years ago, 5,000 and such and so many years ago. It's a mechadish betuvi b'chol yom tavin ma'aseh. Hashem is constantly pumping his energy into creation. So the creation is just a very, very thin, if you will, facade, even though on the surface it's levushim rabim, it seems like so many layers. And yes, there are so many layers. That it explains in Perek Nun Aleph that in the end of the day, this is the reason that we can't easily, we have to ponder on the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as opposed to, in the end of the 51st chapter, the reason why it's not natural And we have to ponder on this reality. If it was so natural, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu was so much in appearance in front of us, why do we have to ponder on something? No one has to tell me there is the sun and there is the moon. I see it. So there is a concept of levushim rabim, which allows creation to appear on the surface the way it is. And the Lashon Al Tereb and Perik Lav and Vav, somewhat creation says, I'm here, there's nothing behind me, Ani v'afsi eid. And we have to work on ourselves to look at the truth within creation. The emes Hashem la'olam, it's an avodah. And the reason is because there's levushim rabim, if there are many, many garments, which obscure the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Make no mistake, that's true. And that's why the heavens look the way they are, and the appearance of Shamayim and Aretz, in other words, heaven and earth, look exactly the way they are. They have the physical appearance, the physical facade. Because of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light, which come through even a little more, they wouldn't even exist as in a physical appearance, and stand and appear the way they are, somewhat obscuring the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted it to be exactly that way. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Nisav HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is like dir v'tachteinim, a dwelling place in creation, the way creation is, with a physical appearance. And again, as Alter Rebbe's Lashon in the 36th chapter, an appearance which denies the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but just it's not meant to stand with that. That's not meant to be to stand with that status quo of denial, chas v'shalom, in the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the ani v'afsi eid. That's something that's the material which we work with. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. Dira v'tachteinim, a dwelling place in this very physical world, that we take this is our starting point, a world which obscures the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. More says ani v'afsi eid, I am and there's nothing else exists. That's the material which we begin the journey of Avodas Hashem, taking that and revealing the godly reality within that. Granted, there are levushim rabim, but nonetheless, we know that we are, again, a mind which is accustomed on a constant basis to see and appreciate Olam Hazeh, the world, the way it is, the emes Hashem le'elam, the connection of Elokus with Elam, a world of an Eved Hashem, a world with a Yid which the Moshe Rabbeinu within him is on the surface on a constant basis. And later the Alter Rebbe says the Lashon of Emunah, Amen. It's something which he's constantly accustomed to do. So here you're dealing with someone who's well into the arena of Avodas Hashem, well into the conscious mode in Avodas Hashem, in this case of the recognition of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, additional to the heeding and adhering to Hashem's call and his submissive bittul and a constant submissiveness and a nullity to the word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're dealing with a Yid which is scrupulous with his Torah, with his mitzvahs, and more so, someone who finds and looks and seeks HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and finds HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and lives with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and on a constant basis, again, Amen, for this type of person, he could appreciate that in the end of the day, you know what's behind those garments. And just knowing what's behind those garments of everything around you is enough to stand with an overt, sensational Yiras Shamayim, fear of heaven. Have a